and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing on for vLENT 2019 as we read the Diary of Saint Faustina. Finally came up with my little calendar here, and today we are going through entries 138 to 187 in the diary. One of the things that struck me most was when she said that she often heard these words in her soul: strengthen yourself for combat, repeated over and over at various times. And continuing on, she says, in the time of peace as well, the soul continues making efforts just as in time of battle. It must exercise itself and do so with energy, otherwise it has no chance of attaining victory. I regard the time of peace as a time of preparation for victory. She goes on to say that prayer is one of the ways that the soul can arm itself in times of combat or struggle or difficulty. I think that's a solid concept for all of us to remember, because of course we need to go to God in our times of crisis. He is our strength. He will pick us back up. But we tend to forget to not only just pray and rejoice in the good times and be thankful for those, but to use and take advantage of the times of peace where we aren't overwhelmed with the trials to continuously build our strength and grow in holiness and virtue. That way, when the trials do come into our lives, we are armed and ready. Because, of course, no matter what, no matter how hard we try, no matter how good we are of a person, we are going to face trials because we're simply human and because we live in a fallen world. And so because of that, it's so important to arm ourselves with spiritual reading like this and with prayers and just growing our relationship with God. That way, when the troubles do face, we're as ready as we can be. In entry 149, she says, when the Lord himself wants to be close to a soul and to lead it, he will remove everything that is external. And then she goes and talks about how she became sick and nobody wanted to be around her. I think after that happened, like at first she was sad she didn't get any visitors, but then it came to the point where she didn't really want any visitors because she realized Jesus was enough for her. This reminds me a lot of the Time of Singleness, and I think I mentioned it in my book, but one time somebody said, I think the reason that you're single, even though you desire marriage, is because God wants you all to himself. And basically, not that God isn't as much with me when there are people in my life or now that I'm married, but at the time, everything needed to be removed so that I could grow in my love for God and my realization that he alone is enough for me. Because if I didn't have that realization, not only would my faith not be as strong as it is, but also when, say, my husband did something that maybe disappointed me, or my kids do something that disappoints me, whatever it is, I would have crumbled at that moment. But because I draw my strength from my relationship with Christ, and I know that he is that solid foundation when I'm troubled, when people do wrong me or bother me or irritate me, I go to his word and I'm back to him. And I go to communion and I go to reconciliation. I receive the sacrament so I could grow in that relationship with him. But if I hadn't had those times of trials, I would have never known. I wouldn't have had a reason to reach out. So that is something to keep in mind. Sometimes when we're in that place of darkness, we tend to think, why would God do this to me? He must not love me, or he would make my life better. Why is he giving me these trials if he's good and he loves me? But maybe that's exactly why he's allowing those things to happen. We can't fully understand it. We can't fully grasp it. I don't think it's just part of the mystery of being human and everything. But I think it's something, if you are facing a trial right now or a bunch of trials and the burden seems so heavy and you're mad about it because why would a good, loving God do that to you? Think of it more as, how is he using this to draw me closer to him? How can I use this to rely on God more, to learn about him more, to grow? And when you think of it that way, it gives purpose and meaning to your suffering. And that's the thing about the saints. I think that people who aren't Catholic, but even some Catholics, have this idea that saints are these perfect people who had everything good happen to them and they were really nice and happy and smiley and they're going to heaven. But that's not the case when you truly read about their life. They endured a lot of struggles and difficulties if you read up on a lot of them. And Saint Faustina was no exception to that. She struggled greatly, not just with her physical health, but just mental health too. I mean, can you imagine having these visions and having people think you're weird? And then she seems to be so in touch with her emotions and feelings. That must have been very difficult to sort through everything. And I like in entry 151, she says, God often allowed such things for the sake of my inner formation. So something bad happened. I think she got embarrassed about, I forget what. But yeah, like I said before, you know, those struggles are for our inner formation. Nobody says we have to enjoy our suffering, but the beauty that can come from suffering is worth focusing on. Again, I highlighted over in entry 166, she says, strangely, God sometimes allows them, but always in order to manifest or develop virtue in a soul. That is the reason for trials. So kind of reiterating that fact of this helps us grow in virtue, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's painful, even though we don't like it and don't understand it. All right, so I thought I would end this with a prayer, and I don't know if this was necessarily supposed to be a prayer. I think it was just these spiritual exercises she was doing, but it kind of reminds me of a prayer. So I'm going to say it as a prayer, but I'm reading directly from the diary. Let's see, this is entry 163. Help me, O Lord, that my eyes may be merciful, so that I may never suspect or judge from appearances, but look for what is beautiful in my neighbor's souls and come to their rescue. Help me that my ears may be merciful, so that I may give heed to my neighbor's needs and not be indifferent to their pains and moanings. Help me, O Lord, that my tongue may be merciful, so that I should never speak negatively of my neighbor, but have a word of comfort and forgiveness for all. Help me, O Lord, that my hands may be merciful and filled with good deeds, so that I may not only do good to my neighbors and take upon myself the more difficult and toilsome tasks. Help me that my feet may be merciful, so that I may hurry to assist my neighbor, overcoming my own fatigue and weariness. My true rest is in the service of my neighbor. Help me, O Lord, that my heart may be merciful, so that I may feel all the sufferings of my neighbor. I will refuse my heart to no one. I will be sincere even with those who I know will abuse my kindness. And I will lock myself up in the most merciful heart of Jesus. I will bear my own suffering in silence. May your mercy, O Lord, rest upon me. I thought that was a beautiful prayer. I think I may print it out or something like that, because it's just a good reminder to care about other people, because I think a lot of times with our prayer we become so self-centered and focused on our pain, our suffering, and while we can totally do that and our suffering is important to pray about, it's also important to think of other people. And that's one thing that I'm working on a lot this Lent, is just having a greater awareness of the needs of others in my life. Yeah, just some beautiful things happening in this book. I hope you're all enjoying it too if you're reading along. I hope you're having a great start to the week, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye! Subscribe!